I'm Ann Boss, and it is my pleasure to introduce Professors Wendy Petersen-Boring and David Gutterman from Willamette University, along with their students, Kate West, Kaitlin Imai, and Sawyer Garrison. Wendy is a professor of history at Willamette who focuses on intersectionality and gender issues. David teaches politics, policy, law, and ethics, and is also the associate director of the Center for Religion, Law, and Democracy. They're both highly respected scholars who publish in their fields. In 2016, Wendy and David founded the Conversation Project, which is their initiative whose mission is to assist students in developing the skills needed to bring together factions and people through dialogue, including storytelling and art. You may remember a year or so ago, the Conversation Project sponsored photographer John Noltner, and many of you may have even had your portraits taken by John. That was sponsored by the Conversation Project. In 2025, the Conversation Project sponsored Kate, Kaitlin, and Sawyer to journey to Northern Ireland's Corrymeela community, which is a peace and reconciliation center that played a pivotal role in the 1998 Good Friday peace agreement. Their purpose in journeying to Ireland was with the folks there to explore how communities can heal divisions and create belonging across their differences. Today, David and Wendy are going to moderate a conversation with Kate, Kaitlin, and Sawyer as they reflect on their experiences in Ireland. Thank you so much, and let's welcome them.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be with you all. Thank you for welcoming us here. So, you did such a great job with the intro. We don't need to say much more other than just to pause for a minute and just let you inside. Well, first of all, I would like to say something. We're joined by our partner, Tommy Van Cleve, who's in the Office of Community Engagement. Tommy, can you raise your hand? Yeah. And Tommy has been our partner in our trips to Northern Ireland, and also his office helps sponsor the summer internship that you're about ready to hear about. So he's a vital part of our community here. Just a little sort of insight into the why did we find the Conversation Project. As you might be aware, we're having a hard time listening to each other in this country. Just because we have ears doesn't mean we know how to listen. And the polarization that you see every day in the community and on the news and in your Facebook feed and with your relatives and friends that affects us was affecting our conversations in the classroom. So students just were not willing or able or as willing as they had been to listen to somebody who had an opinion that was different than theirs, or to lean in with genuine curiosity for someone who is different. They were more hesitant to talk about really difficult things, the things that we want to talk about but are really hard to talk about. Everyone, if you remember back in 2016, 2017, 2018, everybody just activated, right? And they still are. So David and I spent a year and a half doing research nationally, looking at groups across the country who were doing dialogue across difference and doing it really well. And our question was, well, what makes it work? How is it you actually can speak and listen to people who are different with curiosity and compassion? How do you do that? So we researched for a year and a half, and then we distilled our findings into a curriculum that we've taught to college students. And we're about ready to start our third cohort of students. And it's been an incredible experience, transformative, amazing, and it is by far the favorite work I do. It gives me the most joy. It is the most transformative for our students, and I love it. And one of the things I love the most is working with my colleague, David.
I don't want to, am I on? No, I can just use this. It's okay. I really want to turn this over to the students as quickly as possible, but I just want to first say how glad I am to be here with all of you, today. And I want to acknowledge that it can be really hard out there. And what you're going to hear is not that the work is easy that these students have done. The work is difficult. But it also comes with hope and a sense of possibility that they are both discovering in the communities that they've engaged in and that they are creating as they do this remarkable work of trying to help bring people together for difficult conversations. And for us in the Conversation Project, we are really committed to infusing all of this with a sense of joy, right? Because so much out there can lead to despair, and we are working really hard, and it's very easy when you work with folks like Kate and Sawyer and Kaitlin to be filled with a sense of possibility and hope and joy. And so we're really delighted to be able to be here with all of you today. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. While we get our slides back up, there we go. I first want to say how glad I am to be with you all. And I'm going to start off by giving a little bit of an introduction about what A Piece of My Mind is and kind of what our summer looked like. So this summer, the three of us interned with A Piece of My Mind. A Piece of My Mind is a multimedia arts project founded and directed by John Noltner, an award-winning photographer and storyteller. A Piece of My Mind uses portraits and stories to bridge divides and encourage dialogue around important issues. John's work includes traveling exhibits, mobile studios, workshops, and inspiring keynotes. Many of you saw John's work during his visit to campus last semester. We can attest that John's work opens up people in remarkable ways. People take deep care in what they share and are profoundly impacted by the stories of others. Sawyer, Kaitlin, and I had the opportunity to travel with John this summer and help tell these important stories. Over the course of the summer, we helped conduct over 40 interviews and produced hundreds of portraits. You will see some of these in our presentation today. Our summer started in Telluride, Colorado. Then we traveled to Northern Ireland, followed by Big Sky, Montana, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and finally, New Orleans, Louisiana. The slides we heard, the stories we heard here in New Orleans can be found on John's website as a podcast series titled Still Here. These interviews, here's a little bit of the behind the scenes of our interviews. These interviews included Alex Kolker, pictured here, a coastal scientist tracking the Louisiana wetlands, and Ebony Woodruff, an agriculture attorney and former member of the Louisiana State Legislature. John will be releasing the stories from Northern Ireland very soon. None of this work would be possible without the Conversation Project or without our professors, David Gutterman and Wendy Petersen-Boring. And it would absolutely not be possible without our Assistant Dean for Civic Engagement, Tommy Van Cleve. We would like to thank the Susan Hammer Fund and the Office of Civic Engagement for their generous support funding our summer. We are incredibly grateful for all of them for giving us this opportunity. Now, each of us will spend about 10 minutes telling about a few of our favorite stories from the summer, and we will open it up for questions. All right, Here we are in the lovely landscape of Ballycastle, Northern Ireland. So I just want to start by saying, for me, this summer was not just a summer internship. It wasn't just a job. It was also an exercise in finding our way to walk through the world and how that might look different for each of us. We learned to an even greater extent how being attentive to the wounds in our society helps to bring us together. We were able to be immersed in so many different communities, doing so many different kinds of work, and it was hard not to want to do it all. To hear every story, to participate in every movement, and to be involved in rebuilding after every disaster. But we are human, and we can't be everywhere or choose every path. About halfway through the summer, I stumbled upon this poem, which reminded me of the patience it takes, and will still take, to settle into our purpose. The poem is titled Clearing by Martha Postlethwaite. Do not try to serve the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open, cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to the world so worthy of rescue. And with that, I'm going to share some of the stories and experiences that were especially meaningful to me this summer and which have touched me deeply. One of the moments that really set the theme and the tone going into our summer was the Women Writing for Change coffee talk at the Mountain Film Festival in Telluride, Colorado. My professor, Wendy Petersen-Boring on the left, and dear friend Julie on the right all went to a panel discussion with the authors Leslie Chang, Shelby Strager, Cassidy Randall, Rosemary Wahola Traumer, who's one of my favorite poets, and Cheryl Strayed, who's one of my favorite authors. As soon as we walked in, you could feel such a good energy in the room. Women were piled on couches to hear these 5 authors speak about their careers, their books, their writing processes, and their life experiences, as well as the ways they supported each other, listened to each other, and held each other up. When responding to a question regarding writing that resonates with your audience, Cheryl Strayed said that she has always known that what I feel inside of me, you feel inside of you. She said, I've never been wrong about that. She said she always tries to write not who we are, but who we are really. Though I didn't know it then, these 2 quotes really shaped the ways I encountered and understood the stories we gathered in Northern Ireland and beyond. In late May and early June, we traveled to Hilltown in County Down, Northern Ireland. Hilltown is a small village in the parish of Clonduff, located at the foot of the Mourne Mountains. While there, we interviewed and set up a studio day with the women of Clonduff, a cross-community group that brings together Catholic and Protestant women for a variety of different activities. Here's a little video that I put together to capture our time there. While we were in Hilltown, we met a woman named Martina Byrne. Martina founded the Women of Clonduff as a response to both the isolation she felt after having her first child, as well as observing the deep desire for connection that was present in her community, especially among women living in rural areas. Martina is also a strong advocate for the recognition of women's foundational role in Northern Ireland's peace process. Martina explained that many people categorize peace building as a certain kind of work, but Martina believes that separation isn't necessary. It's everyone's work. She thinks that everything we do is peace building, from a coffee hour to a celebration of the anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday agreements. We are always working in pursuit of peace. And here's a little bit of the behind the scenes to give you a window into what a great portrait session looks like. Sawyer's on the left holding the light. Martina's in the middle making us laugh, of course, and I'm on the right holding the scrim, which I then proceeded to balance on the yellow part of the electrical line to give Martina enough shadow for the portrait. And if you've ever held something very large and very high winds, you know this was a challenge. It turns into essentially a sail. And so there's just a little bit of the beautiful rolling Irish hills. And another woman we met, whose stories really stuck with me throughout the whole summer, was Brona McNasney. She's a public historian in Hilltown and also a member of the Women of Clonduff. She's very passionate about the power of storytelling and used Twitter, and now Blue Sky, to post her daily diary entries from 1981 for a whole year, which gives a really unique narrative perspective of the Troubles and everyday life through the eyes of a 13-year-old girl. The following is an excerpt from Brona's diary, which she read aloud to us during her interview.
All right, so the 5th of May, 1981. Bobby Sands died at 1:17 a.m. this morning. It's very sad, and the whole day has been filled with trouble and news about it. The people of Belfast were on the streets the moment they heard and there was fighting, and many girls from South Armagh didn't come into school today because the buses were off. The police barracks or somewhere near there has just had a fire, but I think it's out. I couldn't stay falling out with my friends, so although we're not as friendly as we used to be, we are friends. She doesn't know how disappointed I was after Saturday. We had a falling out. Domestic science, or home economic, I guess you call it, passed peacefully, and although I was told off once or twice, my Cornish pasties turned out lovely. There may be trouble yet, I don't know. Many shop windows have been broken in Dublin, and I feel sorry for the Sands family.
The juxtaposition of very live sectarian violence, especially in the year of 1981 when Brona was keeping her diary, and the otherwise mundane life of a teenage girl, including getting in trouble at school and everyday friend drama, paints a really unique perspective when we think about the ways that conflict affects all people, regardless of location or age or proximity, not just the ways conflict affected the ones who were involved in politics or had been held in prison, or who were witnessing open gunfire on the streets, or who had lost loved ones. Brona stressed that the idea of peace in a post-conflict society is complex. Post-conflict for whom? She told us that the violence here didn't stop, it just went behind the front door. The trauma of the Troubles is so present in their bodies and memories that it has transformed and manifested itself into chronic societal wounds. Northern Ireland has the highest rate of suicide in the UK, the highest rate of domestic violence, and substance abuse is prevalent among a wide range of ages. And at the same time, it was so hopeful to see how joyful and buoyant each of these women were. They radiated such fun and bubbly energy, even as they spoke openly about the real impacts of conflict on their communities. Many of the stories that we heard were difficult, but we also need a place to find joy and play amidst the harder truth, because always they exist at once. So, while we were in Ballycastle, we jumped in the frigid ocean And by we, I mean Kaitlin and Sawyer and John, because I stayed very warm and dry. We hung out with many cows. I named this one Gertrude. She has a lovely haircut. And sheep, who were very curious why someone was running past them every morning. And my personal favorite, donkeys. This is a real highlight for me. This donkey belonged to a 100-year-old woman that we interviewed, and the donkey's name is Bella. And we also ate lots of ice cream. Tough moment for me and the ice cream at this specific time in Derry, but filled with joy nonetheless. We explored Belfast, and we listened to lots of Irish music. And we picked wildflowers on summer solstice and made flower crowns. We went to Yellowstone after our conference in Montana, and just to throw around the geographic location a little bit, we listened to Zydeco music while we were in Louisiana. The balance of hard work, travel, and fun made this summer super special. And now I'm going to hand it off to Sawyer.
Hello, hello. Thank you all for being here. It's so fun to revisit these memories, and it's just a blast to talk about this again, so thank you. Today, I'm going to talk about three people whose visions for peace were really tied to the land they inhabited. By tending to the land, these people have reckoned with history, built community, and stayed grounded in the constancy of something larger. We met Christian Bailey in Louisiana. Christian is a farmer outside of New Orleans, and he's working to farm indigo and other pigments with sustainable practices. Christian's work encompasses both farming and community programming, which focuses on sharing his dye practices and engaging other young Black Louisianans in agriculture and gardening. He talked about the challenges of this due to the lasting memory of plantations and slavery in the Black community, but he also talked about how much joy he gets from tending to the land, that it is this time that gives him the energy to do all the other work that he does. Christian gave us a phrase that frames so much of the work that we witnessed and were a part of this summer. What I was going to show is Christian talking about his method of land stewardship, which he focuses around three main facets: minimal intervention, deep observation, and time. For Christian, these instruct his relationship to the land, which he has let go feral, meaning it has largely been taken over by indigenous plants, and he's learning to understand them through deep observation and a lot of time to learn what interventions may be appropriate. Minimal intervention, deep observation, and time could be the roadmap for our work this summer. As interviewers and just as people, we were so excited to gain a deep understanding of others and their context. When we entered a space, we hoped to engage through minimal intervention so we could deeply observe what people were doing naturally in their community. The depth of our experience and work was possible because of the time we committed to each space. We usually had at least an hour on each end of the interview, and most of my favorite time was in these moments. This approach was modeled for us across different communities we visited. Throughout the summer, we saw how minimal intervention, deep observation, and time could play out to positively impact the natural environment, community, and the self. We had the honor of meeting Elder Rosina Philippe of the Atakapa Ashok-Shiawasha tribe in Grand Bayou, Louisiana. Elder Rosina has traveled the country and engages globally to advocate for indigenous sovereignty and coastal restoration. Her homeland, the Louisiana coast, is experiencing massive land loss. The Louisiana coast loses roughly a football field of land every hour. While climate change has exacerbated certain natural effects, the reasons for this land loss is largely human. We asked Elder Rosina why she stayed in a place that is experiencing so much change. She said she was a placeholder, marking the spot where her ancestors had lived so that young people of her tribe could return to this spot, even though so many had moved away. She told us about how the land has changed since colonization. And hopefully that will play, but maybe it won't. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh. That's okay. That's all right. I'll do a very bad reinterpretation of what Elder Rosina was going to say. But what I learned from Elder Rosina, especially in that clip, she talks about how the oil companies had dredged canals up through southern Louisiana, which had allowed seawater and salt water to flood in and take land out. And how that was really because these oil companies had no real knowledge of the stewardship that had been going on in southern Louisiana for hundreds and thousands of years. And so what I learned is what is best is often to look back at what has been done before you start to take steps forward. It exemplified that major intervention without deep observation and consideration can cause harm, and remediating that harm takes an inordinate amount of time and serious work. Here you can see a part of Grand Bayou where Elder Rosina lives. 60 years ago, these canals, all this water that you can see, 60 years ago, this area was just feet wide. You could jump across it. And that's just 60 years ago. Today, the entire ground is covered with water. None of these houses are accessible except by boat. Yet Elder Rosina's connection to the land and to her ancestors is maintained. We had the privilege of meeting her family, and they shared their love for each other and the place with us. We spent hours with them touring Grand Bayou and laughing together. The community is specific to that place, and Elder Rosina says this is her source of hope. We saw so many stories of land stewardship in Louisiana, and they're all amazing. You should go and listen to the podcasts. But Louisiana was rich in these stories, but also we saw so many stories like this in Northern Ireland. Bryony Reed was the first person we met in Northern Ireland, and she shaped our experience there. Bryony is an artist and a cultural geographer who works across Northern Ireland, facilitating community peace and reconciliation efforts, along with ecological revitalization. Her work combines multiple disciplines with specific attention to people's connection to land and culture. Northern Ireland has a violent history. It is still very divided by Catholics and Protestants, and this has implications for how people relate to the land. English Protestant settlers transformed the country from forests to plantations, destroying much of the natural ecosystem. When we asked Bryony what got her into peace work, she re-emphasized her deep love for the country and the complications of that. She said that all her work came from a desire to reckon with that. We saw Bryony's efforts to return the land to its natural environment in rural settings and here in an urban garden in Belfast, where she is working not only to plant native species, but also the plants of immigrants, to build a Belfast that is responding to the present and looking towards the future. Bryony's work takes her across Northern Ireland so that communities can move towards the future together. She facilitates community events and conversations. We saw her work in multiple small villages where she had become a part of the community through a lot of observation, time, and outreach. The style of her community work and reckoning with the troubles is rooted in deep knowledge of place. She knows that change takes time, but a place and a community is best suited to heal itself. There's no one way to do peace work, and not everyone we met did it this way, but so many did. And it was so beautiful to me, and I loved being a part of the spaces they had created. This summer, I built a set of skills in media production and nonprofit work, but I gained so much more. This summer was a study in dispositions, in approaches to meeting the challenges of our communities with hope and action. The disposition of minimal intervention, deep observation, and time is one that I hope to carry with me. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, you've heard beautiful stories of beautiful people from both Kate and Sawyer, and what I've chosen to share with you all will be no exception. We've met so many incredible people with such rich stories, and it has felt so fulfilling to be able to be in a community with others through a time when there's so much dividing us. While we were in Northern Ireland, we went to a summer solstice gathering that Bryony, who Sawyer already introduced, and her husband Craig hosted at a community garden that they created. One of the things that we did was braid New Zealand flax into rope or twine. Craig, who had grown up in New Zealand, showed us how to do it and took a few strands of flax and twisted them together, looping it around his finger, then weaving them into each other to form a strong cord. He talked about the land the plants came from, the way he'd been taught, and how his community used it. There are other strings and plastic cords that might be more convenient, more innovative, but there's something about sitting there together, being taught by another person, using natural fibers from the earth, and hand weaving them into something strong in a process that has been used for hundreds of years by those who came before us. That strength is from us. It's from our hands, from the earth, from our ancestors, and from being in community with one another. Lately, it seems like we as a society can get distracted, rush through things, and replace what we used to do with technology that makes things more convenient. And in that chaos, we can lose what connects us to one another, or forget how much we need it. Like us learning from Craig how to weave the cord, this summer has been about learning how others weave together their communities, about weaving relationships and connections. We've not only gotten to be a brief part of those communities, but built deeper relationships with people. Whether it was a few hours, a day, or a week, we wove connections that will live within me for a long time, and I hope within them too. We spent an hour, and we spent a few hours with Paul in Derry, London Dairy. First, we sat and we heard and held his story. A story of hardship and of healing. I could feel in the room that this was a special moment for all of us. We went down the road and took his portrait, all the while talking and laughing, for he was quite a happy person. We picked a flower from the same bush near where we took the portrait. After we were finished, none of us were really ready to part ways, so we invited him to lunch. The lunch, which he insisted on treating us to, was spent in wonderful conversation. He told us how much it meant to him to have a space to share his story and to reflect upon it. He had such deep gratitude for John and for the three of us. And when John gave Paul one of the Piece of My Mind books that he brought with him, Paul not only asked John to sign it, but passed the book over to the three of us as well. To see how much of an impact we'd had on him through his actions and his words was such a gift. He opened up his book and he asked me to pick a number, to which he opened it up to that page and placed the flower and closed the book. I've been collecting flowers in my journal throughout the rest of the summer. We spent one day with Sunpai in New Orleans. Sunpai is a musician and a former National Parks guide who plays the harmonica and the accordion like no one else. He's a conservationist of music and culture and of the wetlands and the environment. The day we spent together started out with him opening up his home for our interview. Barry Yeoman, one of the most engaged interviewers I've ever listened to, asked beautiful questions, to which Sunpai told beautiful stories in response. He talked of his journey through life, how he holds all his different passions in harmony with each other. For his portrait, we went to the Barataria Preserve, and John had this vision of having him stand in the swamp with his accordion, as you can see. So, in order to get that picture, somebody had to be in the swamp. So I'm from California, and this is quite new territory for me. I'd never been to the South or seen the swamps before. But I'm always up for an adventure. So I slipped on his size 11 waders that he brought for me, and went all the way in. The bugs got me quite a bit, but it was worth it for the portrait. So. That night, we went to Chikiwawa, which was a little bar and a music spot where Sunpai and Louisiana Sunspots were going to perform. The band that was on before them was still playing when we got there, and Sunpai spent most of their set standing with us, talking, and of course dancing. And in true New Orleans fashion, Sunpai asked Kate to dance. No, it's not every day that you get to meet a local celebrity or dance with one, much less. So. And then also the band before invited Sawyer up to come play the washboard. So it was quite a big night for us. We stayed throughout the whole show, talking throughout the night with our new friends, Billy and Les, who was the couple at the table next to us. We joined in line dances and clapped along to all of the music. His music did welcome us wholly into New Orleans. He told us music was magic earlier that day in the interview, but he really showed us that night. We spent a week with Bryony Reed. You've heard a fair amount about Bryony already, but she's worth talking about over and over. John had met Bryony on his initial planning trip to Ireland a few months prior, and she was a big reason that we got so many amazing people to interview. Bryony was so connected in her communities and to the surrounding ones as well, and we got to watch her interact with both long-standing relationships and forming new ones. Not only did she connect us with everyone and get people in the door, but she housed us and fed us quite well for a week with Irish stews and brown bread. This was such a special time because over the course of a week that we spent with her, sitting around the dinner table and talking long into the night, we got to know her and she got to know us, much more than anyone else we'd met. And in all honesty, I spent all of the time in awe of her comfortability with silence and the way that she could hold multiple things to be true at once. When it came time to interview her, John was kind enough to let me do it. Throughout our time, she spoke of community building and all of the groundwork that must take place before anything else can happen. She spoke of the quiet work of listening and of what it is to provide space for people. She was lovely throughout the whole interview, but what I remember most was afterwards. We stood in the community garden that she and her husband created and talked. I told her I'd learned so much from listening to her and of my worry that was present when I was coming into the summer. My worry that this process and the pace that we were moving at would mean hearing people's stories and then having to leave, and taking their stories with us but not giving them anything in return. It is then that Bryony told me that it was a special thing to provide people with a space to share their story, and that I listened well and held her story with care. She said it is very important to recognize the weight of carrying other stories, but that the time that we shared talking, the time we shared in quiet, was a gift that stays. The next thing that I want to share with you all is a bit of hope. The people we met this summer had such strength in the face of struggle. And what I know to be true after this summer is that strength and resilience comes from each of us. But we need hope in order to stay resilient. And hope is something that comes from not only our own strength, but the strength and wisdom of those around us. Just like the flax, it is stronger when woven together. And instead of me telling you the pieces of hope we encountered, I figured I'd let those beautiful humans speak for themselves. If it goes.
And I think it's more important than ever to look for that light, and wherever you can find it.
Small things. My mother used to always say, small things make a great difference.
Peace for me means acceptance of all the messiness, the uncertainty, the things that make me fear and despair and anger me, and the things that give me hope and that I delight in here. Those are all there.
Reconciliation is a journey. It's somewhere we're on. It's not a transactional moment that just we do something. It's a long journey. So maybe step one is seeing the humanity in each other.
I think it's really wonderful how deeply connected people are by accident. And I think that like this initiative or this thing that we're all doing here is so crazy to me, because like watching y'all set up and watching y'all like do y'all's thing. y'all are the people who like make this a thing, and we all like kind of create a thing together. And I think it's so crazy that like people can be strangers, but then have a connecting point that makes us feel like less strangers. Being placed in a scenario like that around strangers, you start to learn that like there's a lot more within us that is deeply more relatable and connected than there is like separating. And I think it does start with like conversations, and maybe those conversations being ones that are like planned like this one or unplanned, where it's like you just need to have a willingness to talk. Yeah, you need to have a willingness to hear, and you need to have a willingness to stew on things, stew on conversations, sit with them, and like hold them in tenderness.
My heart is full. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was good.
I'm very grateful to have been a part of this experience, and I want to thank Dr. Tommy Van Cleve and his Office of Civic Engagement for helping us be able to explore these opportunities. And to Professor David Gutterman and Professor Wendy Petersen-Boring, thank you for your guidance and your mentorship, and for helping me tend to the gift of listening. And now I'll leave you all with a poem. The Grand Quilt by Rosemary Wahola-Traumer. I don't believe we can stitch together only scraps of beauty and squares of light. I don't believe in a quilt that doesn't also have patches of sorrow and blocks of ache. Such pieces are, of course, much harder to want to stitch in, but it matters that we do not exclude them. It matters right now that we do not pretend that they do not exist. It matters that we sew every piece into the grand cloth. It matters, too, how we sew these pieces in, perhaps using our finest silk thread, perhaps with an elaborate stitch our grandmother taught us. Or perhaps we must use a stitch we make up because no one has ever taught us how to do this most difficult task, to meet what seems at first unwanted, wrong, and to incorporate it into the whole, and to do this for as long as we can stitch. That's how long.
All right, if we have any questions.
I don't see any hands up, so I'll just start. Who arranged for who you met there? Was that the photographer how did you know who you were going to go see?
Yeah, John arranged. He went on a pre-visit to Northern Ireland, so all of those interviews were set up beforehand. And then as well, in New Orleans, we worked with a journalist, Barry Yeoman, out of Durham, North Carolina. And so they partnered on that, and Barry had a lot of relationships in New Orleans, so that was set up ahead of time as well. And sometimes, like when we were in Ireland, there would be people who said, "Oh, I think you would really enjoy interviewing my friend so-and-so." And so we would add a couple interviews to that day, because there's always more to hear.
I was wondering, before you met with this individual people, did you have certain issues that you wanted to talk to them about or work out, or were they kind of open-ended?
Yeah, so we kind of left it pretty open-ended. The overarching theme that we wanted to be able to touch on was peace. And so sometimes that looked like asking the question at the end of what does peace look like to you, or how does peace sit with you, or how have you created peace in your own community? But the beauty of the work that John does and the work that we got to engage with is kind of allowing people to be able to share their own stories and their own voice. So we wanted to minimize our own maybe perspectives of what we thought going into it, or what we thought Louisiana would be like, or what we thought the culture was like. So allowing the most space for other people to be able to use their own voices.
This is Lucy. I feel like I've heard of another group going just before you. Are you the only group that's ever done this? And will there be future groups doing this?
So we actually had the privilege of going to Northern Ireland the year before in the summer, along with Professor Petersen and Professor Gutterman, and with Tommy Van Cleve and many more. And so we would have the opportunity to go 2 years in a row, and hopefully there will be more in the future, to be determined.
My name is David. 2 questions. I tried to write it down, but I couldn't write it down fast enough before my mind gave up. And it's so short. Minimal intervention, deep observation, and then time.
Yeah, that's right.
What was the phrase that went with time?
That's it. Just time.
Just time. That's why I was looking for some deep adjective. And then the second one was that last poem. Can I have the title and the author? The title and the author.
Yeah, it's called The Grand Quilt. Sorry. The Grand Quilt by Rosemary Wahola Traumer.
We can put it in the newsletter too.
Behind you, Vanilla. So in all your adventures, what were the things that were the most unexpected or surprising? And then what gave you the most hope?
Great question.
You said it's a test.
I think one of the most unexpected things from over the course of the entire summer was our time in New Orleans and experiencing the culture, and especially the warm, welcoming hospitality of each of the people we interviewed there. In addition to just the story of Sunpai Barnes, who you saw with all of his instruments out in the swamp, and there was a wonderful way that I found myself kind of taken aback, surprised by the ways that he took his work. He was also a football player. So the intersection of his identity as a football player, as a national parks guide, and as a musician came together. And he told us a story about him playing his harmonica in a canoe at 2 a.m. in the middle of a swamp, and having all of the alligators come and surround him. And we're all with our video cameras during the interview, and just kind of a jaw on the floor, because there was this beautiful intersection of his love for the natural landscape and the creatures of the swamp and his music, and that I definitely did not expect.
I'll kind of combine the two answers. I think for me, we got to visit a place called Black Mountain Shared Space in Belfast. And this was a space that was built in between the Peace Wall, so between a Catholic community and a Protestant community. And the people we talked to, many of them were in their 60s and 70s there and had not spoken to someone from the opposite community in over 50 years until they had come to this place of reconciliation. And so for me, there was so much hope and so much surprise in that. And that these people were coming together really around things like knitting clubs or bingo or programming for their children. And the fact that you could have people coming together and becoming friends and not leaving their differences behind, but bringing those with them and being able to recognize the humanity in each other was really surprising. And it showed me how messy piece can be, that it's not perfect, but was really functional there. So that was surprising and hopeful.
Yeah, I think for me, I agree with both of what they brought up. And I think the thing that brought me the most hope was how willing people were to welcome us in every time. There wasn't, every time that we would ask a question, it was met with such joy and curiosity and truth that they were willing to share with us. And that was something that was really special for me, because that also shows how much the work that we've done with the Conversation Project has been able to allow us to engage in these spaces and allow us to bring our whole selves into spaces and hear and engage with people, to ask them to come in and bring their whole selves as well. So I think this summer was really an opportunity and a practice in a way that I will carry forward on how I engage in every space that I am in. But really, I think is a big attribution to the work that we've done here and the time that we've spent with our professors. So
thank you. I want to thank you, each one of you, for sharing your message, and I want to thank Wendy and David for your work and for coming today and sharing your hope. Thank you.
Thank you all.